Hey everybody, welcome back to another Bald Move Pulp podcast, the podcast where we argue, is this really pulp? Shouldn't it be prestige? Today we are talking about the 1997 sci-fi dystopia Gattaca, and special thanks goes to a commissioner for this project, Josh H. Josh H. went to support.baldmove.com, clicked on the commission podcast, and said, this here is the movie you need to be doing, put his money up, and look here, we're doing it. This movie is written and directed by one Andrew Niccol, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Probably more also, of a Niccol, because he's from New Zealand, apparently.
Yeah. He is a Kiwi. He also wrote and directed Simone, Lord of War, In Time, Good Kill, which I haven't seen. That's the only one of those I haven't seen, but also stars Ethan Hawke and is supposed to be highly regarded. Also co-wrote and produced The Truman Show. I kind of like how this guy thinks. I like the cut of this guy's jib. This guy's thinking. This guy doesn't fuck around with just popcorn entertainment. No, he wants you to think about stuff. He was only 30 years old when he wrote and directed Gattaca. If you want to feel inadequate about yourself.
Okay.
But we all weren't lucky enough to grow up in Middle Earth under the good ruling of King Aragorn. So
I want to say he got some access to maybe some CRISPR a little earlier than the rest of us.
He might have gotten might have got some of his G's, his A's, his T's, his C's optimized. Who knows? This movie stars Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman, Alan Arkin, Jude Law, Lauren Dean, Xander Berkeley, who kind of just plays shits in movies. Like, he's always the CIA director that you want Jack Bauer to blow his head off, or he's just a smarmy guy, and he kind of does that, but it's really effective because not that I don't want to spoil the movie just yet. Ernest Borgnine, who I will always fondly remember as the co-pilot to One Stringfellow Hawk on Airwolf. Love this guy.
Okay.
Love this man. This is like this guy's right up there with David Hasselhoff when it comes to 8-year-old Aaron worshiping him. Josh H wanted us to watch this movie. Here's his dedication. I'd like to dedicate this to Jim and Aaron and the entire Bald Move community. I feel like I've gotten more out of Bald Move than I put in, and this commission seems like a good way to try to even out that score. I'm not sure I'd call it my favorite movie, but Gattaca might be the movie I've seen and thought about the most. Like lots of other great science fiction, rather. It almost feels like a futuristic Greek myth or Shakespearean play. It is, in my view, certainly deserving of the Bald Move treatment, and if it leads to a handful of people to check out the film for the first time, that would be very cool too. I feel like Gattaca is one of those movies that we've name-checked a lot and said that, like, oh yeah, because this is the archetypal, like, Aaron and Jim do a whole bunch of navel-gazing futurism talk, because this movie's at its core wrestles with some pretty heavy subjects. What does it mean to be human? What do we think about eugenics? Lightly touches on pro-life, pro-choice type things, and does it in a very smart, intelligent way. What's your history of this film, Jim, and what do you think on further review in 2020?
This movie came out when I was 15 years old, so I know I saw it around the time it came out. Definitely not in theaters, but probably on DVD in like 1999. So I was definitely still a very young man at the time. And I've only seen it once, that one time. It's been 20 plus years at this point. And I don't remember thinking very deeply about this film, like, oh, the implications of genetic testing and all that. Even though the movie is actively encouraging me to do so.
Sure.
I remember thinking, like, oh, look how cool it is, the lengths he's going to hide, his DNA. And I don't know, probably something in my life at the time was more interested about the, like, deception of this character and getting, out of, whatever hell he was sort of born into, right? So I remember, like, those parts of it, but I didn't remember much about, like, the futurism angles like Josh is talking about.
Right.
So going back to it, those are the things that started to stand out to me a lot more.
Yeah. I saw this movie when I was, like, in my early 20s, and I saw it at the theater, and I remember thinking, like, wow, this is some fucking movie. And in the way that like you do in your early 20s when you see something kind of provoking, you tend to just kind of take it as gospel, you know, like oh yeah, I'm buying whatever this movie's selling. Like eugenics seems like it's a bad idea, already kind of associated with Nazi ideology. Boy, why, like Ethan Hawke, he's born with some heart trouble and some other minor setbacks, just a normal human, and he's trying to compete with these supermen and women, and he's getting the job done. He's got 4 million lines of code, not a single error. Fuck, I couldn't do that.
No.
I couldn't do that no matter how many bits you flipped to my DNA code. Why would we keep this exceptional person from going to Titan? And I don't know that my views have changed too much on that, but it's interesting, like, because like earlier this year, Richard Dawkins stepped into a little bit of a yard full of rakes, smacking him in the face when he tweeted out the following tweets, which I want to talk about later. But he says, what is it? His tweet was, "It's one thing to deplore eugenics on an ideological, political, or moral ground. It's quite another to conclude that it wouldn't work in practice, because of course it would. It works for cows, horses, pigs, dogs, and roses. Why on earth wouldn't it work for humans? Facts ignore ideology." The problem, the reason he got drugged for this, because it's quite a true statement. Like, absolutely, you could genetically engineer humans to be superior. But what does it mean when you say that eugenics works?
Sure.
Who does it work for? Who wouldn't it work for? What does working mean? What does superior mean? And
this movie has a definite opinion on that, which a lot of discussion around it actually does. There are a lot of like assumptions being made about the end goal of genetic modification that I think go largely unexamined.
Because like this movie was made as a deleted scene kind of points out in the credits, like this movie was made a few years before we had successfully decoded a human genome. So none of these things were possible. We now stand on the other side of that gulf where a lot of these things are possible. We're just questioning like what we should do, how much we should do of it, what kind of things should we make. And so I think it's interesting to like revisit this thing where it's not so much science fiction as it's like science future, and the future is here. And now that like these technologies are, and there's like, whispers that maybe some other countries that might not have the same kind of scientific and medical ethics foundations as we do, might be kind of pushing some of the limits on these things. Like where do we stand on that? So I think it'd be nice to talk about the movie in terms of just like on its own, like it's like cultural and artistic merits, and then we can have a discussion about like eugenics. Is it good? Is it for you? Is it for me? Who is it for?
Sure.
Nothing can possibly go wrong with this conversation. The end of Bald Move. But so I guess in non-spoiler terms, I really like this movie. I think it's very thought-provoking. It's very well acted. I love it. It's got this kind of like minimalist design and aesthetic.
Yeah.
And in much the same way we talked about The Matrix having this kind of timeless aesthetic. Like what does it mean for The Matrix to be outdated? They're using these ancient, like they're taking these ancient technologies like plain old telephones and rotary dial systems and green screen CRT monitors, stuff that's outdated by late 1990s standards, and they're depicting it as this like kludgy way of super future technology working. So like The Matrix will look futuristic 50 years from now because it never was depicting a real future, right? Yeah. And I think Gattaca works in the same way. You've got like 1950s Studebagers being plugged in as electric cars, and everyone dresses like Don Draper from Mad Men.
Yeah, pinstripe suits. It's all.
Yeah.
It feels very low budget, and it's not that low of a budgeted film. Like 1997, it was 36 million. So, that's a healthy budget. And some big names attached. Produced by Danny DeVito, which is interesting.
You know what? I want to dig into that because I think we'll forget if we don't. Danny DeVito, I think, is really personally invested in this stuff, right? Because he's the kind of guy that does. Well, I mean, he makes these movies. He's like involved in these movies like Twins, which is essentially like a farcical take on Gattaca, right?
Sure.
Like you make the perfect man and you scrape off what's left over from that genetic code and you get Danny DeVito. That's literally the premise of the movie Twins. And he bankrolls this movie because I think that Danny DeVito knows on some level that, like, in a Gattaca world, Danny DeVito doesn't get born. Or if Danny DeVito does get born, it's in some kind of, like, fucking gutter hovel sewer system. And he's not trying to be about that, you know?
I mean, okay, yeah. I mean, maybe that's true. Maybe there's some truth to this. Maybe Danny DeVito has a personal investment. I think in the Gattaca world, Oswald Cobblepot doesn't get born, but Danny DeVito could definitely get born. Like, I don't...
You think so?
I would hope so. It's not that I think that would happen. It's that I would hope it would happen.
What parent selects the Danny DeVito genetic profile?
Well, I mean, okay, if you could show me a side-by-side
he's
of, like,
super funny.
Here's the next child you could have, and it's Jude Law. Here's the child you got cooking, and it's Danny DeVito at 45. Yeah, you take the Jude Law route, but
yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that I think there's a lot of things that this movie does really smart where they're just saying that, like, once you open the door to eugenics, you might not want to open the door to all the horrific implications.
Yeah.
But it's just gonna happen.
It will.
It's gonna happen. Like, you know, if you gave a person a choice to hook themselves up to an infinite pleasure machine for the rest of the world, but it's going to destroy the world in 100 years, probably 90% of humanity takes that deal, if not more.
Yeah.
And there's just, like, some things where it's like, you know, if here's the options, and you can take the options that are the best ones, or you can take the less best options because of, I don't know, some kind of moral or philosophical or religious exception. But other people are definitely going to take these superior selections.
And that's part of the movie,
pressure
right?
to do. Like, the pressure to do the wrong thing is immense.
They say that there are regulations, there are laws preventing discrimination based on genes, and they're just wholesale ignored by corporations, right? And it's just out there. Everybody knows that's the truth.
Kind of like data privacy and personal privacy right now.
Yeah.
You know, we live in a world where we pretend we're 17th century farmers in our houses behind locked doors that no one can penetrate, but we live in a world where literally every single room in our house is mic'd, wired for sound and video. Infrared cameras can penetrate the walls of our homes. Our purchasing habits, our location is tracked. Like, we mentally and philosophically live in the 17th century, but we're getting, you know, pillaged like we're in the 21st century, because we are. And like I said, I think this movie, I'm surprised how I guess I was surprised at how well it held up, because a lot of times I go back and watch things in my late teenage that I enjoyed in my late teens and early 20s, and I'm like, yeesh, woof, whoa.
Especially near future sci-fi stuff, right?
Tends to age in dog years, right?
Yeah.
But, like, fucking Gattaca, man, is a really good Gattaca, man, is a really good film, and Andrew Niccol did a really good job of directing it. And all the performances hold up. It's really fun to see, like, baby-faced Ethan Hawke and Jude Law and Uma Thurman, Alan Arkin when he shows up. Who doesn't like Alan Arkin?
No one.
He's amazing. So yeah, it's a really good movie. I think everybody should watch it. Should we get into, like, should we just start discussing the film? I guess that's full stop. From here on out, we might spoil things. If you haven't seen it, this movie is worth watching, and it also has a few twists and turns that we don't want to spoil for you. So, check it out. It's I think it's, if you got Stars, you can watch it for free. There's a few other services, like I think the premium Hulu's got it for free. Some Slingbox I saw had it for free, but it's also like $3 on Amazon Prime in high def if you want to rent it. So check it out. From here on out, we might spoil shit.
We might actually make a significant dent or significantly boost the box office take of this film just by promoting it here, because it didn't make very much money. It
was kind of like a critical success and a commercial failure is kind of how it's described.
Yeah. Like I said, the budget was $36 million. The box office was only 12.5. So
oof.
Lost like
$12.5 towards that.
That's what I mean, man.
Yeah. Me and my wife / girlfriend at the time attended it. But yeah, I'm actually kind of shocked, because Ethan Hawke, Jude Law, Uma Thurman were pretty big names in the day. Why do you think this movie failed commercially? The name?
I don't know. Maybe it had a bad trailer. Because I can see this being a potentially hard sell in a trailer. Although you go with the entry angle, right? Like, you go with the murder, you go with the hiding, like, wearing blood packets on your fingertips. You go with the bags of piss around your leg, like that kind of stuff. And the intrigue.
Yeah, you
there,
could mark, because that was hot. Like Mission Impossible was all trafficking in that.
Yeah.
Like all this guy, because there's a lot of like
Disguising your
spycraft and cloak and dagger shit going on in this movie.
for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe it had a good trailer. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
The other challenges for the trailer would be that this is a science fiction movie. It's a hard
Yeah.
science fiction movie, but like try to sell that to people.
No,
Like
not in
you should
97.
show a rocket launch or two. Like it's just people sitting. It's people in business suits sitting at computers typing for the vast majority, or do it looks like engaged in random drug tests.
Yeah, I mean, it literally takes laser swords and entirely reinventing the way that action scenes are shot in the Matrix, right, to get people excited about sci-fi. So
yeah, especially this kind of it's essentially trying to market the Matrix, except for take out all the special effects,
right. Yeah,
and get the science fiction nerds excited about it, get the the art house people excited about it, and it's just really hard. It's really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how this movie did artistically, as far as like I heard it was a critical success, but what I don't recall this winning any Oscars or anything like that. So it's like, what did that look like in terms of? I know, like Roger Ebert thought highly of it, and some other contemporary reviews thought highly of it.
So it was nominated for Best Art Direction the year that it came out, but it lost to Titanic, actually, which, yeah, you're not going to win
this
that.
was the Titanic year. Boy, that's tough. I'm surprised it didn't get a nod for like screenplay or something, because it's a really tight, satisfying screenplay.
For the most part, I have some problems with
Do you really?
the actual film and the structure of it itself, but we'll get there.
Okay.
Some of the things I like start even at the name of the film, Gattaca. Obviously, this is a movie about genetic manipulation. And if you know anything about DNA, you know that the letters associated with the base chemicals that make up DNA are A, C, T, G.
Yeah, if you've seen Jurassic Park, you know this. Those letters are flying around and combining and making dinosaurs and frogs and all kinds of shit.
And so, obviously the title uses just those letters in it. And then there are a lot of allusions to DNA throughout the film, both visual and in the terminology they use, like those borrowed ladders are one, because the ladders are used to describe DNA a lot of the time. Like they're just twisted ladders.
I love the genetic slurs. I
hate it so much. It's so stupid.
You hate it? You hate it?
The degenerates? Are you fucking kidding me? That's the kind of thing that goes in a first draft, and you laugh to yourself when you come up with it, and you go, "That's funny," and then you take it out. You only put it in the first draft, so later you could tell the story. Did you know they were initially called degenerates?
But like that feels like that fits the pattern of historical slurs. Like think of all the top racial slurs. Are they clever, or are they just essentially diminutive versions of the full nationality or name or stuff? It's like I felt like like
puns?
borrowed ladder.
I don't think they're usually puns.
But like a borrowed ladder, I thought was really, or valid versus invalid.
Oh, those are
invalid.
Good.
Yeah. The borrowed ladder I thought was really good, because it's like not only the DNA structure, but also like you're getting, you're using the ladder to climb a little bit higher than you would otherwise get. You know, like you didn't get this on your own, but it's also like a perversion of that system, because like a lot of these people in this society are not getting there because of the merits of what they've done. It's because the probability analysis says they're going to be good at this one thing.
Yeah.
I love that there's this line that the Gore Vidal's director character has where, they're talking about, how people don't fail to meet or exceed their potential. Like their potential is a known quantity, that Gattaca is very good at lasering, focusing in. And the detective asks, well, what happens if someone exceeds this potential? Or what, how do you account for people exceeding their potential? And he says that doesn't happen. If someone exceeds their potential, it means we just hadn't adequately gauged the potential in the first place. And I'm like, wow, what a smug, unfalsifiable way to cement yourself as the superior class in society.
Yeah.
I just,
there are a lot of little things like that, right? The catches, the gotchas of gene genetic manipulation and
Mhm.
discrimination.
I really like how they have this culture of paranoia. Like they start with the title sequence, which plays with the GATC sequencing and like the people's names and whatnot, and the credits, and then it's also to you see these like fingernail clippings falling, this body hairs, this skin cells, like it's like a blizzard, a storm of genetic material falling. And I remember watching for the first time. I was like, "What? Okay, what the hell? Where is this going?" But it sets you up for the essential paranoia of the movie, because like we now know, this is after the O.J. Simpson trial and how much we know more about DNA, that like we're just putting out this information everywhere, whether we want to or not.
Mm.
Um, and like dead skin cells, hair, spit, all this stuff, urine, all these things are giving free. You can't help it. You cannot contain that stuff. You can't go to work in like a Tyvek suit,
Yeah.
So like, and the levels of effort that goes into maintaining this fraud is insane, but it's also really intellectually satisfying to like in a Mission Impossible way, to see like, okay, if you're shedding, how do you reduce the amount of things you shed? You have this like crazy ritual grooming. You've
Mhm.
got the special lotions and whatnot, special combs and brushes and scrubs. You also have to have a bunch of genetic material. You need to be able to produce a blood supply on demand, a blood test on
Be-
demand, urine sample.
and skin cells and hairs and things, because they expect you to be shedding something, right? So you have to
Exactly.
make it
If
appear as
you
if you
never
are.
shed anything, it would be a flag.
Yeah.
And you've got this like that's such a beautiful thing you've already alluded to, that like in the Gattaca future there is a lot of laws to protect, because like the reasonable concern of if you start genetically engineering society is like, what do you do with the people who are already born that weren't engineered? And there's clearly a bunch of laws set up to where, like, well, on paper, there is no advantage conferred to an invalid person versus a valid person. But in practice, because you are giving off these things, and it reminded me a lot of, people that deny that there's like systematic inequalities in our current day system. It's like, well, the laws are all the same for everybody. You can't discriminate based on blah, blah, blah. But, you can discriminate based on a credit score.
Yeah.
You can discriminate based on what someone's first name is. And if you know someone's credit score and you know that the average person of a particular class or race has a particular this and a particular name, then you can discriminate. Well, I didn't not give them this apartment because, they're black or Latino. I didn't give them this apartment because their credit score was marginal.
Yeah. But
It's
why is the credit
exactly
score
this.
marginal? Like, have
Right,
they been set
right.
up for failure? Yeah. We'll probably talk a lot more about this when we get to some of the bigger
Yeah.
questions around genetic modification. One of the other imagery things they do with DNA, which I thought was cool, was this spiral staircase. Um,
Mm,
I'm not sure exactly what they're trying to do with it, or if this is just a nice, visual, like if this is just the set designer coming up with this idea and throwing it in there. But they use it on some of their key art, like the poster and whatnot for this film. So
mhm.
I'm expecting they did something more with it that I just didn't catch when I was watching it this one time.
Well, it makes a nice set piece because, like, you're right. It goes in with the helix, DNA kind of thing, but also it just makes a really nice set piece to show Jude Law climbing his way up there torturously. Like
Yeah.
any other staircase, number one, would that even be possible? And number two, would you be able to get the cool angles of him? Like, you can shoot him from underneath, you can shoot him from the side, you can shoot him from up top. Like, and it's just a Sisyphean task, it seems like he's having to do, and it's all having to do like that. I think there's 3 or 4 scenes where it's like a masterclass of building tension,
Hmm.
and that's one of them. And if they didn't use that type of stair, and it's one of those things where it's like, how clever was the writing? Like, did this guy think like,
Yeah.
I actually want a spiral stair because it looks like a single, like a DNA RNA strand, and also because I want to see this guy struggle up? Or is it like that stuff that just kind of gets,
Well,
is that magic that we heard so many times, like in Breaking Bad? Like it's part location scout,
Yeah.
part showrunner, part writer, part producer, and they all kind of like, it's like this stew that like all the best answers just kind of bubble up for.
There's something in there that has to do with them being two opposite sides of the same coin. Jude Law's character Jerome has. I'm going to call them Jerome and Vincent, which are their original names, just so we can not confuse the two.
Yeah.
Sure. But Jerome's kind of curse is his perfect genetics, right? Like they make it clear somewhere in the movie that he tried to kill himself. He stepped out in front of a car, was very much sober, very much knew what he was doing, and failed at his mission, which apparently was to kill himself. And then, Ethan Hawke has been cursed with the bad genetics, and his entire life has been spent trying to overcome those. You get the feeling that like that climb up the staircase is part of that struggle with his own superior genetics that he's been feeling, right? Because he's expected. I mean, there's such a huge expectation on him. And if he doesn't, what happens when your employees don't live up to it? Well, that doesn't happen either. But in Jude Law's case, it drove him kind of insane.
That's another great line, because Ethan Hawke provides this kind of like Blade Runner-esque narration throughout, and he helpfully tells us something like when you get introduced to Jerome and he's in this wheelchair and he's a silver medal athlete, and what's that mean if you're engineered to be the best and you still got silver place? He said something like, for the genetically superior, their success was almost certain, but it was also not completely assured. Because you can still have accidents, you can still have, disease, you can still have random things, and you can also still, because these were all probabilities, right?
Yeah.
They said that Ethan Hawke might die of a heart failure by the time he's 30.2 years old. But what does it mean if he lives at 35 or 65 or 70? None of these. And then you see, I've seen some pro-life material where a mother says, they recommended that I abort this pregnancy because my child is supposed to have Down syndrome or some other horrible genetic defect. And look, turns out my child's actually a professional football quarterback, or he's this or they're that. And the movie also, like in the original, this is something I'm not sure if you got the chance to see it. But like the original credits end in kind of like, we are a few years away from sequencing the human genome. And, in 10 or 20 years, we could have like the power that's in this movie in our hands. And if we had invented this technology 200 years ago, here's a list of the people who wouldn't be here. And they listed Abraham Lincoln's got Marfan syndrome, Albert Einstein, dyslexia, Stephen Hawking, fucking everything that he had,
Yeah.
And the movie kind of asks like, well, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to be genetically superior? What does that get us?
And you have to think about, even if you're genetically modified, you're not the only one. And so that gold medal can only go to one person, and it's not guaranteed to be you, no matter how genetically modified you are or genetically selected you are.
Yeah, and it could be that like, some other nation had slightly grippier shoes, or I can't remember, was he a swimmer, or what was his?
Yeah, he's a swimmer.
He's a swimmer. So maybe the superior genetic athlete shows up the year that the United States invents the shark skin bathing suit that gives everybody a 3%, and like you lose because some other part of technology was better. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? And there's also when the parents were like shopping for their children's genetics, they're like the parents are like, well, maybe we want to leave a little bit to chance, kind of like, we don't want to know the gender. And the guy's like, well, the human condition's already fraught with perils and frailties. Why would you give an inbuilt disadvantage? Why wouldn't you screen all those things out? Don't you love your child? Don't you want him to have the best? And Jesus Christ, that's the argument right there. That's the argument that kind of breaks genetics, or eugenics rather, because what is the line if it's left to individual parents and individual people to decide why, and you could afford it, why wouldn't you have perfect children?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where things get sticky. We will probably get to that toward the end of this discussion.
But there's also little things I thought was interesting, like Ethan Hawke is a faith birth, right? He's just a random collection. He's not the superior individual, but he has an exceptional penis.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So it's like,
Is this luck of the draw? Is this prosthetic? Does he model Jude Law's dick and strap that on?
what if he just random luck of the draw has got an exceptional penis, man? Like that's what I'm saying. Like,
Sure.
what's the movie saying about that? You know, that like if you optimize for one thing, are you necessarily de-optimizing for another? I don't know if that means that like the dumber and more genetically inferior you are, the bigger your penis. But
I don't know.
There's just like really interesting, like little like side things there that I almost had to pause the movie and be like, what the why? What are they saying? What?
I can't tell if it's just an attempt at humor or if it's something that they're doing that they want us to note and think about.
Yeah.
But it was weird.
But there's also like just so many good arguments for like the pro side of genetics, because it's a lot of this takes place in the beginning where the parents are shopping. You know, they got the imperfect child, Ethan Hawke, and they're trying to design the perfect child. And there's this great scene where the mothers, you know, they're having this faith birth, you know, where they don't have any genetic intervention. They conceived in the back of a car, and they're having and they're picking out a name, and they're going to name him after the father. And the father's like, no, wait. Vincent. I don't want to give this son my name because we're gonna have more in the net. And it's like, God damn. I think that's also such a great way to show the, you know, if you're pro eugenics and you think you can do it in a positive way, you can make a better human society. The real sticking point for me is, what do you do? What does the transition look like? Where we're all still Morlocks, right, from the time machine, but we're trying to become Eloy. Like, what the fuck does it look like politically, economically, socially to be the Morlocks in this situation?
I mean, it's
you
a
know,
mess.
like,
It's
yeah,
a mess. It always is. Transition is tough and painful.
It is, and that's just like, and I think about like, you know, in these situations that absolutely happen. Like, what does it be? Yeah. What is it like to be the child that you know was the kind of mistake, the heir, the one that your father didn't want to name after him? But on the other hand, like, you know, what the geneticist is saying is like, look, this child is still you. It's just the best version of you that you could produce naturally. It's entirely possible that you could produce this child. We're just putting our thumb on the scale so that, you know, the best of you gets expressed and the worst of you gets suppressed. And like, that is a very powerful argument to make to people, you know?
Yeah. And it not only like familiarizes, I guess, people who have not thought about these things in those terms with stuff that's important for the film, but it also gives a motivation to the main character, right? He's clearly born and told by society that he's inferior, and he has to he spends the rest of his life and the movie overcoming that.
Yeah, and there's also some interesting commentary with the fact that like Jerome is kind of the perfect man, is you'd call it self-sabotage, except for Ethan Hawke is playing him, so he's like other sabotage. Like, he can't stop drinking, you know?
Oh, yeah.
His genetic profile says that he shouldn't be an alcoholic. He's a raging alcoholic. I need you to give me a sample that doesn't have alcohol in it so I can go into work, you know? And yet he just can't do it. Like, there's a couple scenes here they just really show the dark side of being the golden child that comes in silver. Like, what does that do to you? The scene of him, like, I thought is really powerful, the how dare you scene where Dean Norris goes and hassles this guy for legitimate reasons, and he's in a wheelchair, and he's like, yeah, I just had a skiing accident. How fucking dare you? What are you? You're a detective, so I know you're not one of me, because if you were one of me, you'd have a job here at Gattaca, and you're not just like pounding the pavement. And man, it just really does a great job of showing and not telling the kind of like collective like shame and disgust and self-hatred that you could get in some of these situations, even with completely perfect people.
There are definitely some things that it tells, but I don't know how else you tell this story. Like that whole sequence opening the film is all just narration over like this sort of time, montage of passing of time, which I gotta say they did an excellent job casting these kids as Ethan Hawke. They all look so much like Ethan Hawke. It's remarkable.
So you got like baby Ethan Hawke, 2-year-old Ethan Hawke, 9-year-old Ethan Hawke, 17, 18-year-old Ethan Hawke,
somewhere in there. Yeah.
This is where it gets weird for me.
Yep.
why the fuck do you cast an 18-year-old Ethan Hawke when you have 27-year-old Ethan Hawke?
Yeah, just de-age him a little bit, and you're good.
Like, contemporaneously on Beverly Hills 90210, they had 30-year-olds playing high schoolers. We this year we watched Rear Window, where 50-year-old Jimmy Stewart's playing a 24-year-old guy, playboy. You got, what else did we see this year? What was another? Oh, like Tom Cruise, like in Born on the 4th of July. He goes from like 16 all the way to 50 something, and they just use it. Like, I just thought it was so hilarious that they cast an 18-year-old Ethan Hawke when they got 27-year-old babyface Ethan Hawke waiting in the wings, man.
And the 18-year-old Ethan Hawke is the worst of the Ethan Hawke castings as well,
which is the funniest part of it.
I know,
yeah,
I know.
Yeah. It's Uncanny Valley, because the other's like, okay, yeah, he's a young Ethan Hawke. This guy's just a weird Ethan Hawke doing a bad Ethan Hawke impersonation.
Yeah. But I don't know how else you tell this part of the story when you're doing this montage of like, we got to tell you everything about the world. We got to tell you everything about his birth. We got to tell you everything about the competition with his brother. This movie would be another hour longer if they tried to do all that without, with just time jumps and like showing, not telling. So I forgive it. And I think it actually works pretty well. There are a few things that I don't like about this movie structurally, but we'll get there. I want to talk about some of the positives.
I mean, I think this first act is like so goddamn lean and efficient. Like, it delivers so much story and character and motivation and world building
and intrigue too. Like, that's the thing that you don't understand exactly what's happening. Like at the beginning when you're seeing him like exfoliating and wrapping piss bags around his legs, and you're like,
what the hell?
Why is this guy doing all this crazy stuff? And it's only, I think it's after you get to like this genetic selection stuff that you finally understand why he might be doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's I feel like this might be kind of like an Andrew Niccol kind of thing, because I remember In Time starting the same way, because it's like essentially like it's a heist movie, people are stealing time, right? But you don't know what the hell the glowing thing on the wrist means. You don't know why they're doing. And then as you like, it's a hallmark of like, do something weird and just slightly like it's like, watching a person going about getting ready for work. It's very normal, and it's the way a lot of movies starts. But then he starts scrubbing stuff, and he starts like, getting hair samples out of vials, and like, see that strap into piss bag, and like, okay, this is starting to skew. And you don't find out why that happens but it's like, it's very fascinating and absorbing to watch and try to figure out. Like I said, it's just a clinic for like efficient storytelling. So here's a topic. I think because this movie makes so many fucking points I'm not even sure if it intends to make, but like, now that I've as a 44-year-old thinking back about my life, like all this stuff kind of reinforces. Maybe this is intersectional theory, but like, one of the points it makes is that prejudice policing is bad policing. Like, a lot of times you hear the arguments like, well, we know who's committing the crimes, let's just go like hassle those people, and why. But like, this is like a very great example of why that can lead you to the very wrong conclusions, like, well, we know it's an invalid, so let's just round up and hassle the invalids and do all this other stuff, and like, but it's sloppy and lazy police work, and
it's based on like a sense of superiority too, like, oh, we couldn't possibly have not detected an intruder in our ranks here, so let's go hassle the people who we suspect.
We made the system. The system's perfect. If the system made a mistake, that means we made a mistake. That clearly can't happen. And you see a lot of that in like policing today, the amount of like wrong convictions and stuff, and the fact that there's like a racial component and all that stuff. I thought that was like, again, I don't think the movie set out to make that point. It just effortlessly does in the course of, this movie.
And the assumption that it must be, that the murder must have happened because they found this invalid invalid. They pronounce it very specifically.
Yeah, invalid.
That they found, a DNA sample from an invalid somewhere in the facility. That must be their guy, right? Like, they're so fixated on that.
When it turns out it was the fattest of fat cats, genetically superior on top. Although, I thought it was interesting, since we don't know the timeline when this movie takes place. I got the impression the this time that I watched it, that the Gore Vidal character, the director, the old man, might have been one of those faith births. Like he might have been born before you start, because I feel like Ethan Hawke was born right at the cusp of where, man, should we do it? You know, it's like it's still a society. This guy's born like 40 years before then. He was genetically engineered. It's almost like,
yeah, good point.
It's like, again, this is not explicitly spelled out in the movie, but I think you're supposed to understand that this guy is of a mind that he is, of course, superior because he's got all this money and he's been this successful. And he is able, because he is so smart and so superior, to select only the best of the best of the best, which does not include him. Mm-hmm. So it's like one of these courses where an invalid might have committed the murder, and it might have been the director. I think it's a fun interpretation that I don't think you can falsify or prove from the film itself, but it's a clear implication that I got that, like, you know, and you know, also, like, I bet people, I bet that's also a thing that would absolutely happen in the real world, is if, like, this was stuff that was only available to the ultra rich. Mm-hmm. During that boundary threshold where some people are doing it, some people aren't, the ultra wealthy could probably afford the technologies to let their children, you know, borrow ladders all day long, just fake their documentation, you know, instead of like carrying around piss bags and blood fingertips and stuff, just change the official record to make you appear as valid in the DNA, you know, like, sure. So it's like, is this guy, like, wouldn't it be ironic if the director himself was a borrowed ladder, you know?
I get the impression
that stuff is super cool.
They're not just pattern matching the DNA when they like to some already filled out profile. I get the impression that they're actually testing your blood for its attributes on site in every single one of those tests.
You might be right, because there is a scene where they make that explicit, where, like, they've got this service where you can swap someone's spit by kissing them or something, and you can have their genes tested, and you get the full genetic readout and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's like a special exception, because it seemed like for the vast majority of the time it just pops up that you're valid or invalid.
Yeah.
But maybe you're right. Maybe they're able to sequence it that fast every single time.
I assume so.
Would it take like 10 seconds for her to get the full genetic thing back?
Yeah, nothing. The other thing I like about this murder is it's used very unconventionally. Typically in a film, a murder investigation is like the crux of the entire film, right? Here, it is background for the larger intrigue, the real tension, which is, will he be found out to be faking his identity, and so they go so far with that as to have the end of the movie essentially brush aside the murder investigation altogether. It's just like, the director did it. We don't know how he did it. We don't really. Other than like a loose, he wanted to keep the mission going because it was important. We don't know why he did it, like, specifically. That's almost left unresolved in how loosely resolved it is, right? Because it doesn't matter. That's not the crux of it.
Yeah, you're right. I actually think they did a better job than you're giving them credit for, in that, like, this is a mission there's a window that's open less than 11 days. That only opens up every 79 years to enable this mission, and this is his life's work. So he was going to cut some corners. He's not going to let anything get in the way or jeopardize it.
But the guy who committed the murder is just, you know, some dude as far as we're concerned. He's like,
you can check his genetic profile. He doesn't have a violent bone in his body.
Right. Which,
again, prejudicial police work is sloppy police work.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like how the tension there is not necessarily like, will we discover who the murderer is? Because we know it's not him, right? We've been with him the entire time. We know he didn't murder anyone.
And there's also just a lot, like, this movie takes a hard, like, it's kind of like a slow absorbing science fiction movie that turns into a thriller.
Yeah.
Like halfway through the second act, like a hard turn towards, like, oh my God, this thing's pulse pounding.
Yeah, once
like,
they bust into the restaurant and they start running, yeah.
Yeah, well, even before then, like, this fun thing about, like, hey, let's do something spontaneous. Let's run across the highway to get to this ocean thing, which is, like, super simple, but he's had to take his contacts out.
I love how they connect those things, yeah.
Oh my God, it's so fucking, like, I even knew what was going to happen, but it's so stressful.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is, like, crucially, you don't really, you know, when you're watching this movie for the first time, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know that Ethan Hawke is going to, you know, make it here. Like, I thought, like, there's so many story possibilities that could have happened that I felt like everything seemed possible. Because like I remember thinking one of the things when I first saw this movie that I thought might happen is that Jude Law does somehow take his place.
Yeah.
That like being up in the stars where his legs don't matter. Like when they made that, I'm like, oh God, that's going to be the twist. Like right as he gets on the rocket, Jude Law's going to have some kind of like undersuit exoskeleton. He's going to knock him over the head and he's going to get on the rocket, and then Jerome's off in the stars. But there's like so many possibilities to keep and that's why it makes the suspense genuinely work. Because another one, when the detective is driving home and Jude Law's got to claw his ass up into the second floor, like. There's all these things flying through your head. Like, well, they could just get caught and there could be some other thing to process. Maybe there's a big fucking one of those weird court scene things at the end, or maybe he's going to get away with it, but then like what's he going to do to hide the wheelchair? This detective is kind of sharp. You see these sharp throughout the movie. Like, how are they going to get away with it? Even if he gets away with this stage, it gives you a goddamn ulcer, the whole second and third act of this movie. And just the way they add the suspense and the way they intercut, like there's even like little tiny suspense elevators within the big suspense one. For example, like can Jude Law get to the button that lets him in the building, right? And sound normal. And then that because like a lot of times I think movies play around with the idea where they show like a guy driving across the city and another guy's trying to like get home in time, but you never know like, well, how are they synchronized? Like, is like close? But like when the intercom thing starts ringing, like that tells you they're not just around; they're outside the door, and it's that kind of stuff that I think really nails the tension and makes it feel really real and suspenseful.
Yeah, and I guess another reason I say like the murder is so inconsequential here, or not inconsequential. It's very consequential, but it's like.
Bit of a
brushed aside at the end is because when they solve the murder, it's solved off screen. There's no like context for why they would have even looked at this guy, let alone how they proved that it was him. None of that is in there.
They say he confessed because once it was no longer possible, it was too late to stop the mission or whatever. He just came and confessed and started fully cooperating because he didn't. He didn't care. Now that's weird because like that's not that's not the rich elitist people that I know that's going to accomplish their mission and be like, you know what, fine, I'll take my jail time now. I got what I wanted. No, it's like I want to get two missions to Titan.
Maybe he's better than that.
Yeah, he's genetically superior.
It maybe now is a good time to talk about some of the things that I don't particularly care about with this film. Actually, no, one more thing that I like. Not sure exactly how these connect and how they're being used, but we talked about that traffic scene where he's trying to run across the street without his contacts in. He can't see anything. It's super blurry. It's shot really well. But I get the sense that they're trying to connect that scene with Jude Law, with Jerome having stepped out in front of a car and it hitting him.
Deliberately, yeah.
Right. And like I mentioned earlier, they're two opposite sides of the same coin. So something about like him succeeding here despite not wanting to do it.
In a fully random chance time, like just rolling the dice.
Right. Yeah. As opposed to Jerome stepping out in traffic intentionally and failing to kill himself there. Like
you're absolutely right.
They're doing something with that, and I'm not totally sure what it is, but it's thematically
I think it's just
connected.
A juxtaposition of the random choice, the faith birth versus the predetermined thing, and which is superior, which leads to the better result.
Right. And fate's involved, and you can't take that out of the equation.
I love the reveal at the end where he gets busted. And this smarmy doctor who they hire to play because he's got a punchable face, is Xander Berkeley, is kind of like, he's got him dead to rights. He's going to piss invalid. But the whole time, like they've been building this kind of like character arc with him where he's like, my son was valid, but turns out he wasn't all that they promised. Like those little percentages of probabilities, kind of like maybe they don't exactly specify what the deal is, and then they reveal that he's known all along. Yeah. Like the fact that real right-handed men don't hold their dick with their left hand. Fun fact. And then, Ethan Hawke's like about to have a fucking cow about this stuff. And then it turns out that he's sympathetic because, like, you know what? I think, like, obviously you've gotten this far. I would want my son to have this chance. Wink, wink. We're going to, like, have genetic solidarity here with I'm gonna take one for the imperfect children. I thought that was a great twist. On top of, like, a bunch of, I think, great twists. Like the reveal that Ethan Hawke's brother is the detective that's investigating him, I thought was
shocking. And it worked in that regard.
Especially since I remembered the twist, but I thought the twist was like it turned that like Jerome. I thought Jerome was actually Vincent's brother. I thought that was the deal. That Vincent's brother had flamed out and their parents had died and no one was the wiser, so they would just switch to get ahead. Gotcha. So I was really confused in the first act when they made it very, very clear that that is not the case. And then I'm like, well, maybe I just got this confused with another movie. And then the twist actually hit me double. Like, oh, fuck. Oh, right. Of course, it's the detective. There's a reason that they haven't referred to this guy by any kind of name. He's always just been, the detective and you and sir. And
when you go back and you look at the film, because there were a couple of moments early on that I noted when he looks over at that inspector or whatever, and he gives kind of a funny look, and he looks more nervous than maybe he would normally be, even though he should be pretty nervous because he's hiding his identity and that stuff. But there's a knowing glance there that, it should tell you on second watch, hey, he knows this is his brother, and now he's really in some shit, right?
Yeah. And I'd like to I might get a second watch because Cecily didn't get a chance to watch this movie, and I kind of want to watch it again because I bet it is a real fun back-to-back second watch.
For sure. What other good stuff you got?
Okay. Visual storytelling.
Yeah.
The juxtaposition of Ethan Hawke's blast off with Jude Law being in the incinerator. I remember that really hitting me hard in the theater, but like, man, that is like, step back and give yourself a hand because that visual symmetry is tasty. Mm-hmm. Like literally launching someone else at the cost of this other person dying. And then the one question I had that's not like it's not praise nor criticism. It's more like, what did the lock of hair mean? Because like I thought that was going to be some kind of suicide note or some kind of like encouragement. He's like, don't open it until you're gone. Don't open it until you're up there. Don't open until you're up there. Well, what is the deal with the lock of hair? What did that mean to you?
I don't really know. The best thing I can come up with is that he's going to need hair to spread around like he's been spreading to keep masking his identity. It's almost like a message of encouragement, like you can continue to do this, keep going, because he's accomplished his goal, right? He's gone into space, and I don't think over the course of this year-long mission they're gonna say, "Whoop, we got an invalid on board. Let's turn this thing around."
I almost had the idea that maybe they don't even test up there. Like,
right.
If you can get in there, it's like, what, like it's in the future, but not that far in the future. Like they're not going to drag all this testing equipment and all that stuff. Like, yeah.
So it's almost like, okay, sprinkle this stuff around while you're up there so that, when you come back and they do the testing, which I'm sure they'll probably do, the sweeps of the ship, you'll be okay. I don't know. And maybe you can go on a second mission. Maybe you could do even greater things, right?
Why do you think Jude Law kills himself? Why do you think Jerome kills himself?
I mean, other than he already clearly wanted to, I don't know.
Well, that just flips the question around. Why did he go through all this stuff? Was this like kind of like a very stealthy Will Smith 7 pound situation where like he's like, well, I didn't commit suicide and I'm now crippled. You know what? Maybe I will give someone the ladder. And like, was this his plan all along? Because the thing is, like, when you're first watching this, like, Jude Law giving him like 2 lifetimes worth of genetic material didn't seem ominous to me. Is more of like an ultimate sign. I took it as an ultimate sign of trust. Like, I know that I haven't been reliable and I have been kind of an alcoholic and I have problems, but like, thank you so much for the dedication for us to live. Like, I thought that was a beautiful line. Like, I got the better end of this deal. I only lent you my body. You lent me your dreams. That was kind of like just like, hey, I'm no longer going to hold you hostage. Like, because I think that's the whole idea that like if you give a borrowed ladder all this genetic material, they could just off you.
Mhm.
You know, like they could just fuck you over, and you know the idea that you have to have every day a genetic sample that you have to give and it has to be clean and all this kind of stuff is almost insurance that the borrowed ladder doesn't take the ladder and pull it up the wall behind them.
Sure.
And then him doing that just showed the amount of trust that he had in him.
I immediately assumed he was going to kill himself as soon as he.
Did you on the first? Do you remember on the first viewing though? Because I mean, obviously, I knew. I remember that was one of the images seared in my head. Him pulling himself in that incineration chamber and the blast off. Like I remember that 20 years later. Like I saw that exact 30 seconds in my head, so I knew that was coming. But
no, I don't really remember any of this movie. It's been 2 decades since I've seen it.
One last thing. What psychopath swims in the ocean at night? Haven't these people seen the movie Jaws? Like swimming in deep dark water is crazy anyway. At night, are you kidding me? In a full moon, do you want to get eaten by a great white shark? I kind of think you do. You might have a genetic predisposition to. You might want to see the geneticist about that, guys. I
mean, clearly they don't give a shit. You know, it's just like, oh, we're gonna leave everything out there, or at least Ethan Hawke is. Vincent is.
They never save anything for the swim back.
Speaking of good lines, so I like that one. But I also like the line. I can't remember who says it. Shit. But at one point, Ethan Hawke is told, I think it's Ethan Hawke, they've got you looking so hard for any flaw that after a while, that's all you see, which is so true. And I find that true even, you know, in my line of work here. If you get in the wrong mindset when you're looking at films, you can sort of influence the outcome negatively if that's all you're looking for, right? Because like maybe you've got a great film with a few flaws like Gattaca, and if all you want to see is the negative, if that's all you're looking for, then that is all you will see. And then the whole thing will become a pile of garbage. And I don't know. I like that. It's very true. It's a very concise and clear way to say a very complex idea.
Yeah, perfectionism is a bitch. It's something we laud in society, weirdly, but it's actually the number one thing I think that holds people's potential back.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I'll never write. I don't think I'll ever finish a fictional novel because, like, I always get to the point where, like, you remember, like, almost everything that's great we've ever seen. We talk about, well, there's a little part where they had to drive off road through a couple miles of broken road, but then they get it back. Every time I get to a plot where I can't myself resolve it, I'm like, well, fuck it. Might as well put it on the shelf, you know, rather than just be like, well, if I tell the story well enough, the audience will just go along with it. Like the idea that like someone could be like, you know what? Fuck it. It doesn't make sense, but this movie's dope. And these actors are going to be amazing, and this people are going to want to know what comes next. They won't care like that. I just can't make myself believe that, even though like all my favorite films have huge flaws, and the more you look at it, the more you can see them. Star Wars, you know, fucking stormtrooper knocks his head on a door, makes the final cut. What the hell, you know? You can see through the compositing of the like snow speeders and shit in Empire Strikes Back. It's a half-assed job.
Yeah,
some of the greatest movies ever.
If you're rich enough and anal enough about it, you go back and try and fix it.
And destroy everything you love in the first. All right. So in the spirit of looking at the flaws and it's all you see, what are the problems of this film?
Okay. So let's talk about a minor one. Not even minor. Actually, it's pretty significant. I feel like the brothers' plotline was not executed as gracefully as I would have liked. The sudden reveal is shocking, and it scores points in that regard because I didn't really see it coming, and when they revealed it, I'm like, oh shit. But then they shortchange it, I think, because they're trying to reveal it at the last second. So after that, it happens in the same scene, the reveal that it's his brother, and also the challenge of let's race again, right? Let's see who goes out the farthest. And they strip down and they go out into the water, and he says the poignant line about I never left anything for the swim back.